You remember freshman year of high school? It's weird, right? I mean, 1 minute you're the king of middle school. The next thing you know, you've made it to high school and the campus seniors have made you their campus biznatch for at least a year. Life comes at you pretty fast, and the same can be said for rookie running backs from last year. Was their rookie year ideal?
Oh, hell no!
I mean, 2020 basically sucked all around for almost everyone on the planet last year, and you know these guys were in the locker rooms with their veterans. I'm sure somebody ended up with some icy hot in their jockstrap just to be hazed. But just like I don't like to talk about the nipple accident of 1996, my freshman year, I'm sure these guys are ready to move past it also. So make sure you hit that like button, and let's see if we can find a few backs that may be in line to hit their groove or get lost in a sophomore slump. What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everybody's doing well out there today as we kick off off-season content. Now, I'm back from vacation. Kyle filled in the past couple weeks, did a great job kicking us off here in the right direction, right? Because off-season content is what we love to do. We have a little bit more time. We're not, constricted into 1 week segments like we are during the season, so we can dig a little bit deeper and find more of that information that you guys have come to love and enjoy in this channel. Now, we don't deal with a bunch of crazy opinions and stupid hot takes just trying to get attention. That's not what we're about. We're trying to make you a better fantasy football player, and that's what we're going to do once again here this offseason. So before we get into some sophomore running backs that could be in line for some huge seasons, maybe some sophomore slumps, one quick thing that I noticed before making this video. 37% of you guys out there watching this video have yet to subscribe to the channel. Listen, if you're looking to get better at fantasy football, you found the right spot. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. But now it's time to dive into the list. Who are the guys we're going to be talking about in this episode? Well, here's a list of the guys that I got that we're going to compare here side by side. And you're going to see a lot of names that you're probably pretty familiar with from the 2020 fantasy football season. Jonathan Taylor really turned it on strong late in the season. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, pretty much a big disappointment. It's kind of why we wanted to avoid him in the first round of last year. Didn't quite live up to expectations. James Robinson. We told people about him back in June on Patreon, and it just told people, hey, be on the lookout for James Robinson. Boy, was he a pleasant surprise, because for a lot of people, he may have been a waiver wire ad after week 1. Cam Akers really didn't get a chance till late in the season, but we saw what he did with it. J.K. Dobbins, another one of these guys, didn't get a lot of run, but when he did, he popped off the screen. DeAndre Swift, he's playing for the Lions. Poor guy's playing for the Lions, but hopefully now they're going to start trending in the right direction and utilizing him a little bit more. He was stuck in running back hell last year with Adrian Peterson and Kerryon Johnson. We need to get him more touches. Antonio Gibson, the guy who barely played running back in college, came out and really surprised a lot of people, looked really good for the football team. And Zach Moss. Why did I include Zach Moss? He's kind of on this list as like, which name does not fit here? It's Zach Moss. The reason I included him is a lot of people last offseason were super high on Zach Moss in this Buffalo Bills offense. So I wanted to throw him in here to kind of compare him to some of these other big names. Does he fit in this list? Maybe he gets a little bit better. Maybe he gets more opportunity. But let's see how he stacked up against these guys here last year. But when we look at these guys, we want to make sure that we compare them equally in similar areas, right? We can't just look at carries, because it's not fair that some guys got more volume than others. Some guys will probably get more volume in 2021. So here are the sections that we're actually going to look at to really dig deep into these guys. And here's the 6 sections that we're really going to compare these guys on. And the first one, yards after contact per attempt, right? How easily or not easily tackled is this player? Why are we doing it per attempt? Well, it's not fair that some of these guys got, 230 carries? Some guys got like 112. So obviously the guys with the 230 carries are going to have higher numbers. If we do it per attempt, we can compare them a little bit closer, a little bit more apples to apples, I guess you could say. What about evaded tackles, right? We want those guys that have that elusiveness. So how many evaded tackles per game? Yards per touch, their efficiency. This is also going to include pass catching work. What about breakaway runs? We want that big playability, right? Those big chunks of yardage, those big touchdowns. That's what really helps win fantasy football matchups on a weekly basis. So how often can they get those breakaway runs? Broken tackles, right? We want to fight for that extra yard. You want those guys that are always going to fall forward more often than not, right? You're looking for those guys to always get you that positive yardage. Team rush attempts, right? We want to find the teams that are going to run the football a lot. If you're on a team that really doesn't focus on the run, the opportunity may not be there. So this is where we're going to look at rush attempts and find out which teams really have that greatest volume for these potential running backs here in 2021. So we'll dive into our first metric here, yards after contact per attempt. So at the time the defender makes contact with the offensive player, what does that running back do after that? And the number that really jumps off the page is J.K. Dobbins, right? 2.47 yards after contact per attempt, more than a half a yard more than the next closest running back, which surprisingly is Zach Moss. Now, what are we going to do in each one of these metrics? We're going to assign them a score 1 through 8. The lowest performer in each metric will get 1 point, the highest will get 8, and then we'll total them all up at the end and see who has the highest overall score. Now, a lot of people may be surprised that Jonathan Taylor dead last in this metric, but he also had over 230 carries, and remember, beginning of the season, this guy's yards per carry was horrible, right? His vision was bad, and he was not finding the holes, and was basically a liability earlier in the season for the Indianapolis Colts. It wasn't until end of the year that he really started to turn it on, but by that point, dug himself a little bit of a hole, and he really couldn't get out of it. 1.31 yards, not horrible. I mean, obviously, it's better than nothing, right? We want these guys falling forward when that contact is coming, but you can see how everybody lines up here as far as yards after contact per attempt go. What about evaded tackles per game? And holy James Robinson, this is like his category, right? I mean, 5.6 evaded tackles per game. That has elusiveness written all over it, and such a surprise, right? A lot of people didn't even know who James Robinson was kickoff of week 1. By the end of the year, he was winning people fantasy football championships, but this guy was rock solid almost the entire year. He shows the elusiveness. Jonathan Taylor right behind him at 4.3, and we really saw that end of season also, right? That's really where these boosted numbers came for him. Antonio Gibson, we knew that he was going to be elusive coming into the league. We just didn't know what type of volume he was going to get. DeAndre Swift is a little bit of a head scratcher, right? 1.5, the lowest by 1 evaded tackle per game in this metric, and really, he wasn't utilized on the ground very much. More times than not, he was utilized in the short passing game, screen plays, and he really wasn't given that opportunity to get the ball in space, which really didn't give him the opportunity to evade many tackles. He needs more volume because when he got it, he produced with it here this year. But this is just something we need to pay attention to going forward. J.K. Dobbins right here at 3.1. Solid numbers for everybody in this category, maybe with the exception of DeAndre Swift. What about yards per touch? And don't forget, with yards per touch, it's going to include rushing and receiving, right? This is not just yards per carry, this is yards per touch. And J.K. Dobbins is going to finish here at the top of this metric at 6.1. We know that this kid is a 3-down back. Him and Gus Edwards, we had a huge timeshare end of season. How much more volume does J.K. Dobbins get here coming up? I mean, when you take a look at all these metrics that we're going to today, the Baltimore Ravens have lined up to have J.K. Dobbins be a workhorse in 2021, and huge numbers could be coming his way. But at 6.1 total yards per touch, he's going to finish tops in this metric alongside of Jonathan Taylor and DeAndre Swift, both with 5.5. Zach Moss, right? This is where Zach Moss is going to struggle because he isn't really known for the efficiency, right? He's kind of the between the tackle, ground and pound, involved a little bit in the passing game. Not a whole lot. Didn't see a whole lot of Zach Moss. Did struggle with injuries, but we knew that coming into the season that he's an injury-prone type of running back. But yeah, he's going to finish dead last in this metric here once again. What about the big play, the breakaway plays? That's what really helps us here on Sundays, right? That's what helps put us over the top in some of these matchups are these big plays. Which leads us into breakaway runs, which are rushes over 15 yards. And is it a surprise that Jonathan Taylor finishes first in this category? Really, no, it's not. I mean, the guy was an athletic freak. He has the size, he has the speed, and absolutely blew the doors off of almost everything at the Combine last year. We knew coming into the season this guy's athletic ability would put him, in a position to be towards the top of categories like this. But what about J.K. Dobbins? I mean, is anybody going to question the fact that he had 11, only 3 less than Jonathan Taylor did? But what makes that crazy? J.K. Dobbins had 100 less rush attempts than Jonathan Taylor did. So in 100 less attempts, he only had 3 less rushes over 15 yards. The guy is super explosive. We talked about, his evaded tackles and his efficiencies and yards per touch. J.K. Dobbins with more volume is going to be an absolute beast in fantasy football. Antonio Gibson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire both there with 8. Who's dead last? Once again, Zach Moss. Is it a surprise? And I don't want to act like I'm just bagging on Zach Moss. because I'm really not. That's not the intent of including him here. I just know a lot of people were high on Zach Moss last year, and I'm trying to paint the picture that you can't always just look at the preseason hype and expect big numbers. A lot of things go into play. That's why we have to break these things down the way that we do, trying to find these guys. But what about the guys that fight for the extra yards, right? I mean, they don't want to be arm tackled. We don't want running backs that are going to get arm tackled because they lose out on a lot of potential yardage. So let's take a look at broken tackles. And this is where we really get to see the power of Antonio Gibson, right? A lot of people didn't know what to expect from him, didn't have a huge college resume at the running back position, didn't really know how he would fare in the NFL. Well, he led this group with 20 broken tackles, which means he's not a guy that's going to get arm tackled in the backfield. He's not somebody who's going to go out there and maybe be at the level of a J.K. Dobbins, but that doesn't mean that he couldn't be. He's still growing in the position, and he's got so many great traits of a running back in fantasy football. Antonio Gibson is going to be on a lot of my fantasy football teams here in 2021. You see James Robinson was 16. Not a surprise. He led all these guys in carries. He had more opportunity to break those tackles. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Jonathan Taylor with 15. A name we haven't really mentioned a whole lot. Cam Akers. Now, why are we not talking about Cam Akers a lot? Well, honestly, he's fallen behind in a lot of these categories, but I don't overly want to fault him for it because he really didn't get the opportunity, right? He was splitting touches in the backfield with Malcolm Brown and Darrell Henderson, but what's going to happen this coming up year? Now they have Matthew Stafford as their quarterback. Are they going to sacrifice the running game a little bit to throw more with Matthew Stafford? I mean, do they just give the job outright to Cam Akers? A lot of questions in this backfield. Cam Akers is somebody who I love the talent on, but he's not a slam dunk draft pick for me as of just yet. Let's round it out here with team rush attempts because we're looking for those guys who are going to be on offenses. They're going to run the ball a lot, right? If they get more opportunity for these big plays. So let's look at team rush attempts here. And it's not going to be a surprise that J.K. Dobbins is going to finish first because the Baltimore Ravens run the ball almost as much as any team in the NFL, 34.7 attempts per game. That's huge, right? And now with no Mark Ingram in this backfield, if we could see more J.K. Dobbins and a lot of the numbers we've seen here earlier in this episode, I'm telling you, this guy is the limit for J.K. Dobbins. Would not surprise me if he finishes top 12 in the position here in 2021 fantasy football. He's definitely a name I'm paying very, very close attention to. Cam Akers, we just mentioned it right here, 29.6. He's going to come in second in this metric, but it's not all his, right? You got Malcolm Brown and Darrell Henderson. We already mentioned them. How much of that volume does he get? Jonathan Taylor, great opportunity for him to get more volume there in that backfield. I mean, we saw it towards the end of the season. If he can start that way in week 1 of 2021, could be some huge numbers once again. Zach Moss, what do we see with the split with Devin Singletary? CEH, what's going on in that backfield? Is he going to get more of a lead role in 2021? That's definitely something to pay attention to. James Robinson is a super surprise to me because when you look at the season that James Robinson had, and then you see that the Jacksonville Jaguars only average 21 rush attempts per game because they're always losing, right? They're always having to throw the ball. That just shows how efficient James Robinson is, and if he can have this role once again, love me some James Robinson. Let's take a look at the overall scores here and see how everybody fared when compared against each other. So here you have it, all the scores for each section. We got them totaled up here on the far right corner. You can see some higher numbers there for Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, Antonio Gibson, but I'm going to go ahead and sort it for you here just so you can see how they list 1 through 8. And here you see it, J.K. Dobbins finishing number 1 overall, 37 total points, followed by Jonathan Taylor and Antonio Gibson. Not shocked by Jonathan Taylor being here, number 2, a lot of people's favorite in this running back class, but J.K. Dobbins is definitely somebody who super intrigues me, right? I mean, now that there's no more Mark Ingram in this backfield, not that he was overly involved in 2020 by any means, but in his rookie year, we saw huge flashes from J.K. Dobbins. We see the efficiency. We see the yards per touch, those high numbers. J.K. Dobbins is an elite talent that a lot of people forgot about because of a late season ankle injury and then not competing in the NFL Combine last year. Well, he started a little bit slow, but once he got to be 100% fully healthy and got some volume in this Baltimore Ravens offense, we saw big things from J.K. Dobbins, and he is definitely somebody who I want a lot of here in 2021. Antonio Gibson, another one of these guys who's super intriguing to me because we didn't even see the ceiling yet. We may have saw the ceiling on a few certain weeks throughout the year, but we didn't see his overall season-long ceiling, and the ceiling is absolutely huge for this guy, and he could be a value on draft day. Clyde Edwards-Helaire going to be right here at the 5 spot. I do expect him to climb up a little bit more in 2021. He wasn't 100% healthy to end the 2020 season. but I really need to see him get more consistent volume because this backfield as a whole just didn't see the volume. It's not like he was losing work to anybody. Nobody was really getting work in Kansas City here to end the season. Cam Akers going to round it out here last, but like I said, there's a lot of question marks surrounding the Rams offense and what it will look like in 2021. I'm not writing off Cam Akers, but I'm not going to overpay for him either. So let's take a look at projected ADP of where we may be able to get some of these guys once our drafts actually come around. And a lot of this is going to depend on what kind of offseason we actually get from the NFL, right? I mean, we're going to have, mini camps. Are we going to have training camps? Are we going to have preseason games? We don't know all these things yet. As of right now, it's not looking too good for a lot of those things, but that may influence some of these ADPs. As of right now, we got J.K. Dobbins sitting right around the 3rd round. That could climb up if there's preseason games and people get to see him with a full workload. Jonathan Taylor in the 1st, not a surprise. He'll be a late 1st round pick for a lot of people here in 2021. Antonio Gibson in the 4th could be huge value. James Robinson going to climb all the way up to the 2nd. It's really going to depend on what moves Jacksonville makes here in the offseason. Do they actually take Trevor Lawrence? They probably should, but that's going to make a lot of decisions that could sway James Robinson's potential ADP. Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the 3rd. I have a feeling this is going to climb up too. A lot of people are going to read into that Kansas City hype once again, and I have a feeling that people may overpay once again for CEH, but it's just something to pay attention to as we move forward. Cam Akers in the 3rd, DeAndre Swift in the 4th, Zach Moss late in the 11th. Not somebody who I'm going to probably actively go after for any reason. I mean, I love the offense of the Buffalo Bills. I just don't see Zach Moss being a cornerstone of it anytime soon. So yeah, probably not going to own a whole lot of Zach Moss, but you can see here where these guys may fall. It's early. It's February. This is definitely going to change, but as of right now, this is kind of where they project ADP-wise. So to me, it sounds like we need to put J.K. Dobbins' name down on a draft sheet somewhere, right? Maybe you got a notebook, maybe you got a Post-it note, maybe you got a really good memory. Whatever it is, remember the name J.K. Dobbins, because if he gets a full workload in this Baltimore offense, huge numbers could be coming. But I'm not going to be writing off any of these guys, right? Maybe I'll write off Zach Moss. I'm probably not going to draft a whole lot of Zach Moss. I'm not going to write anybody else off, though, and here is why. A lot of people are going to start making videos saying, avoid this guy in 2021. He's going to be a bust. How can you possibly know that? The rosters aren't even finalized yet. You have no idea who's even going to be on some of these teams, who some teams' quarterbacks are going to be. You don't know everything yet, so how can you make those type of claims? It irritates me because I see a lot of people being led the wrong direction. That's why we like to lead with all the stats and the facts, and then let you guys put the pieces together and figure out what works best for your fantasy football league, because that's what it's all about. We're trying to help people get better and win more fantasy football championships. A, it's awesome to win, and B, a lot of people win money doing it, and I'm all about winning some money. I did in 2020, and let's do it again in 2021, but we want to know what you think. You just saw a presentation of a bunch of different metrics and their stats and where these guys ranked. Does it surprise you at all? Are you looking for any one of these names in particular in 2021? Make sure you put those down below in the comment section. We love to interact and go back and forth with you guys. We try to answer as many of the off-season comments that we possibly can. We do our best, right? It is the off-season. Views are down, which absolutely sucks because we still put in the same amount of work, but it is what it is. We love what we do, and we are very, very grateful that you've taken your time to follow us here once again in 2021. Hopefully you guys had a great week this week. We look forward to hearing from you down below in the comment section. Hit the like button, and we'll talk to you later.